Dust rolled across the wide Wyoming street as if the earth itself carried whispers of judgment. A lone woman stepped from the noon stagecoach, her boots landing softly on boards worn thin by countless lives. Clara May Hensley did not look up when the eyes of the town turned toward her. She had long ago learned that the weight of stairs could press harder than stone. Her chin remained low, and her hands clutched the only bundle she owned, a small iron pot wrapped in faded cloth, its blackened surface scratched by years of stirring suppers for those who had never thanked her. In that pot she carried not just metal, but proof of usefulness in a world that had told her she possessed none. The saloon's swinging doors gave a long groan as she pushed inside. Shadows of smoke and laughter filled the dim air. Men in dust-coated hats leaned over cards and whiskey, their words sharp, their gazes sharper. Clara approached the counter, where Sadie Pritchard, a tall woman with painted lips and a gaze hard as polished glass, set down a bottle. Clara's voice, steady though soft, rose above the din. She asked if the saloon might need someone for the kitchen, someone who could cook steady meals, stretch beans into something filling. Sadie looked her over slowly, from the mud on her hem to the worn lines around her eyes. Then she laughed, not kindly but in a way that drew others to laugh too. "You? Girl, you've got no looks to please a man and no shine to charm a room. What good's a plain face and quiet mouth in a place like this? You'd scare away custom." Heat climbed Clara's cheeks, though her eyes stayed steady on the wood counter. "I ain't good for much," she said softly, "but I can stir a pot." The words only deepened the laughter. Sadie waved her off with the back of her hand as if swatting a fly. Clara turned, humiliation coating her like dust that never brushed away. Each step to the door dragged with the weight of those smirks. Out on the street, she stood very still, watching wagons rattle by, and she wondered if all her life was bound to this, being told she was worth less than the dirt under men's boots. By the livery, a man leaned against a post, pipe smoke curling above his weathered face. His shoulders bore the heaviness of long labor, his eyes shadowed by both sun and sorrow. Elias Boone had lost too many things to count: stock in droughts, trust in false friends, warmth in an empty house. He had long ago given up on surprises, until he saw the woman standing as if the earth itself rejected her. Something in the way she clutched her bundle, protective, almost desperate, held his gaze. "You lost." His voice came low, not unkind, carrying the patience of a man used to silence. She shook her head. "Only looking for work." He studied her, seeing not what she lacked but what she carried, the resilience in her stance, the pride wrapped tight around that iron pot. "What can you do?" Clara swallowed, her voice nearly breaking under memory of laughter. Still, she said it again, as if it were a truth she had to remind herself of. "I ain't good for much, but I can stir a pot." For the first time that day, she met a pair of eyes that did not look through her. Elias's mouth curved, not into mockery, but into something near a smile. "Then stay," he said after a breath. "Stay and stir up my life." She blinked at him, unsure if the words were jest or invitation. But his face carried no cruelty, only weariness and the faintest glimmer of hope. He offered her the smallest nod, then turned toward his horse as though the matter were settled. Something inside Clara loosened. No man had ever looked at her without weighing her against some prettier, finer measure. This one seemed to weigh only honesty. That evening, the sun bled red across the plains, and Clara followed Elias up the trail to his ranch. The house was plain wood, its roof patched, its yard bare of decoration. Yet when she stepped inside, she felt something rare, a silence not cruel, but waiting. He showed her the kitchen, its shelves near bare. He set down kindling and muttered, "See what you can do." Her hands trembled as she lit the fire. She pulled dried beans from his stores, sliced what little meat he offered, and stirred the pot with steady rhythm. The scent rose slowly, filling the small space with warmth that seemed to seep into the very walls. Elias sat nearby, quiet, watching not her face but her hands, as though the steady circle of the spoon told him more than words. When she finally set the bowl before him, she could not raise her eyes. He ate slowly, each bite thoughtful, then placed the spoon down with care. "That'll do," he said simply. 2 words, nothing more. Yet they landed like blessing. For Clara, that moment spread wider than the walls around her. No laughter followed, no jeers. Only acceptance. She realized her heart had been clenched tight for so long, she had forgotten the feel of release. She did not know this man, nor he her, but something about the silence between them was different from all the other silences she had known. This one carried promise, the kind that could be built upon. Outside, coyotes called into the night. The lantern flickered, and Clara leaned against the wooden table, her body aching from travel, her spirit aching less than it had that morning. She looked toward Elias, who sat with shoulders heavy yet gaze steady. He had offered no grand praise, no tender speech. But he had given space. Space to belong, if only in the quiet turning of a spoon, the warmth of a shared meal. As the fire dimmed, Clara understood something deep in her bones. This was not yet a home, nor a life, but it was the first corner of ground where she was not turned away. And though the road ahead might hold storms and gossip, tonight ended with something stronger than humiliation. Tonight ended with the simple truth that even a woman told she was good for nothing had stirred a pot, and for one weary rancher, that was enough. And so, with her bundle set by the hearth and the pot resting in ashes, Clara May Hensley closed her eyes in a place that did not laugh her out the door. For the first time in memory, she wanted to wake to tomorrow. Morning light spilled across the Boone Ranch like melted gold, seeping into cracks of weathered boards and filling the air with a fragile sense of renewal. Clara woke with the scent of smoke still clinging to her dress and the echo of silence resting gently in her chest. She moved quietly through the small house, setting water to boil, careful not to disturb the rhythm of a man who had given her a chance when no one else had. Elias appeared from the yard with his hat pushed back, his shirt damp from the early chore of hauling water. He nodded to her, not with the stiffness of strangers, but with the subtle recognition of 2 souls learning how to share the same ground. His words came slow, measured, yet they carried weight. "Town will talk." Clara kept her eyes on the steaming pot, her fingers tightening on the handle. She did not need to ask what they would say. Already, she imagined Sadie Pritchard's sharp tongue carving her reputation like a butcher's knife. A plain drifter woman living under the roof of Elias Boone, it would travel fast, faster than fire across prairie grass. And yet, she found she did not flinch. Not in the way she once had. Her voice, though soft, held steady. Let them. Days passed, each one shaped by work that stitched them closer together. Clara tended the kitchen, but she did not confine herself to it. She mended shirts, fed hens, and carried water with a strength that surprised even herself. Elias, though reserved, watched her with quiet respect. Their conversations were few, yet the silences between them grew thick with unspoken understanding. She found in him not a rescuer, but a companion who neither mocked nor dismissed. Still, beneath that slow weaving of comfort, the weight of town judgment pressed against them like a storm building on the horizon. The whispers began on Clara's second trip into town. She had gone for flour, walking past the saloon where men lounged in the doorway. Laughter rose sharp and cutting. "Boone must be desperate, taking in that one," a voice jeered. "Ain't she the same girl Sadie ran out?" another chimed. Clara kept her gaze fixed on the dust at her boots, clutching the flour bag close. But inside, the words stabbed deeper than she cared to admit. When she reached the wagon, Widow Esther Pike, kind-eyed and quiet, touched Clara's hand. "Pay them no mind," the widow whispered. "Some of us see more than they do." Clara nodded, though her throat ached with unshed tears. That night, she stirred stew while Elias sat sharpening a knife by the fire. She told him what she had heard, her voice thin as thread. He listened without interruption, then set the knife aside. "Folks talk when they're empty," he said simply. "You filled a house with warmth today. That counts more than any tongue in town." His words did not erase the sting, but they wrapped around her like a blanket against cold. Then came the storm. It rose sudden and merciless, the kind that swallowed the plains whole. Wind tore across the land, rain slashed against the house, and thunder cracked with the rage of something ancient. Elias bolted upright when he heard the panicked bellow of cattle. Without hesitation, he pulled on his coat, grabbed rope, and ran into the tempest. Clara stood frozen at the doorway, fear binding her. For a breath, she considered staying where it was safe, letting him shoulder the burden alone. But another thought took root. He had trusted her presence, her strength. To hide now would mean proving every cruel word true. She seized the lantern, shielding its flame, and plunged into the storm. Mud sucked at her boots, rain blinded her, but she pressed on until the shapes of cattle surged in the lightning's glow. Elias fought to drive them back, his voice raw, body bent against the wind. Clara's heart hammered, yet she lifted her lantern high, shouting words she did not know she possessed. Her cries joined his, sharp and commanding, guiding the herd toward the corral. She swung the lantern wide, waving her arms, refusing to let fear undo her. The storm roared, but she roared louder. By the time the last calf stumbled into safety, exhaustion had broken Elias's strength. He dropped to his knees in the mud, chest heaving. Clara reached him, lantern trembling in her hand. She knelt beside him, hair plastered to her face, her dress soaked through. Her other hand found his shoulder, steady, unyielding. His eyes lifted to hers, glazed with fatigue yet blazing with recognition. "You're more than enough," he whispered, voice raw from shouting. "More than I ever hoped for." Her breath caught, a sob rising but held back. She had been told all her life she was worth little, that her face held no beauty, her hands no skill. Yet here, in the ruin of storm and mud, a man she respected declared her more than she had ever dared believe. Tears slipped down her cheeks, mingling with the rain. "I ain't good for much," she whispered back, voice breaking and remade in the same breath. "But I reckon I can keep a man's home warm, and his heart steady." He did not answer with words. He took her hand, mud-slicked and trembling, and held it as if it were the most precious thing the storm had not carried away. That grip was vow enough, silent, steadfast, binding not by ceremony but by the raw truth of survival and choice. The storm passed, leaving the land bruised but alive. Together they walked back, lanterns swinging, the house glowing faintly against the darkness. Clara's limbs ached, her skin chilled, but inside she carried something fierce and unshakable. She had faced not just the storm outside, but the storm of doubt that had long shadowed her, and she had not faltered. In the days that followed, the town gossiped as before. Sadie Pritchard's voice carried loud in the saloon, calling Clara a burden, a plain shadow clinging to a man's pity. Yet gossip lost its teeth when set against the sight of Elias Boone walking into town with Clara at his side, his glance steady, his manner unchanged. The widow Pike smiled knowingly, and even Sheriff Abel Cormack tipped his hat, as though some unspoken verdict had been reached. Clara no longer shrank from whispers. She stirred her pot in Elias's kitchen, tended the hens, lit the lanterns, and each small act grew into something vast, a declaration that worth was not granted by others but lived through persistence and care. She did not need to shine like Sadie, nor charm like the painted girls at the saloon. She needed only to be steady, and that steadiness had saved cattle, a ranch, and a lonely man who had thought his life would never shift. On a quiet night, when the prairie stretched endless beneath a sky thick with stars, Elias sat beside her on the porch. He said nothing, but his hand found hers. Clara looked toward the horizon, where darkness met light, and felt the weight of her journey settle into peace. To you listening now, perhaps you've known voices that told you you weren't much, that your gifts were too small to matter. But hear this, even the simplest act, done with steady hands and honest heart, can stir more than a pot. It can stir a soul awake. Clara May Hensley proved it on a ranch scarred by storms and silence. And in her quiet courage, she found what the world swore she never would, a life that was hers, and a love that saw her clearly.